I play indie games at a near 10-to-1 ratio now, and I never feel exhausted. If I play a AAA game from start to finish, I feel like I need to take a vacation afterwards. It feels like the biggest games in the industry continue to get bigger and offer us more while we continue to get less out of them. I'll play a game that I like, and then years later there will be a sequel, and the reason that I love the game is now buried under a bunch of useless garbage that's just there to make the game look better rather than actually be any better. And this is something that we've seen play out across the entire industry, especially when it comes to major franchises. Adding in a bunch of useless stuff that just does not need to be there, whether that's open worlds or RPG mechanics, non-narrative games now becoming just flooded with dialogue, useless game modes, battle royales, whatever it might be. And all these things are there just to inflate playtime because developers have gaslit themselves into believing that, well, the longer a game is, the more value that players get out of it. And also on top of that, it's really nice because it keeps you in the game longer and more likely to be able to buy microtransactions. But while it took a while, I think that feeling of paying more for less, that general erosion of quality, that's the reason why so many people are frustrated today. That's why you have angry gamers. But you know what gamers aren't angry at? Indie. They're the most widely celebrated games in the industry. Small teams making small games that feel a hell of a lot bigger than they actually are because they become the inversion of AAA. They are offering more for less. What a value proposition. But I think it actually goes deeper than that. I think it's more about fulfillment and enjoyment. And that's what I want to talk about today. And I also want to talk about why I think indie is succeeding and why I think the reason for that is because they go deep instead of wide. But before that, this video is sponsored by boot.dev, the best way and honestly the fastest way that I've found to be able to learn back-end development without getting bored or giving up halfway through. I've been testing it myself, and what really sets it apart is how it feels more like a game than a course. You're not just passively watching videos, you're writing real code from the very first lesson, building projects in Python and Go, and actually preparing yourself for the kind of back-end jobs that pay well over 6 figures in the US. Boot.dev solved the hardest problem with e-learning, boredom, by, well, just making the entire thing a game, giving you XP, levels, achievements, even quests, anything to be able to keep you engaged. And even if you do get stuck, well, they have an AI wizard bear named Boots that jumps in with some Socratic-style questions to kind of guide you towards the answers rather than just handing them to you. What I really love about their site and program is you can just create a free account, preview every single course, and read all of the content in guest mode. But if you want the real experience, the interactive coding, answer verification, progress tracking, and community boss fights, well, you want the membership. So if you're serious about learning back-end development the right way, go to boot.dev and use my code LegendaryDrops to get 25% off your first entire year on an annual plan. That's boot.dev, code LegendaryDrops. Link is in the description and the pinned comment. There is a laundry list of reasons as to why we've seen so much animosity towards a lot of games over the years, and I noticed that while I often talk about these issues, I never just grab a single part of the problem and just run it the length of the field. And in one of my recent videos, I had offhandedly mentioned the idea that too many games are trying to go wide instead of deep, and how I don't need games to do everything, I just need them to do a handful of things really fucking well. That idea clicked for me because I saw people complaining about Mafia Old Country and how the game didn't have swimming. Swimming, a mechanic that would add nothing to the game's experience. And when I saw that, I started thinking about what a single mechanic like that will do to the design process of a game, because it's never just swimming. The moment that you add it, you have to justify it. Now there's a mission where you fall into the water. Now stealth sections are built around it. Maps and navigation are reshaped for it. Even the game's story is going to bend or break just to be able to acknowledge it. And what looks like a simple omission to players, in reality, is the start of a slippery slope that starts pulling the entire design away from where it was meant to be. And that's where bloat comes in, a word that I use all the time, because it doesn't just describe one thing, it describes everything. These companies, their budgets, their production pipelines, and most of all, the games themselves. AAA has stretched so far, so broad, that it's lost touch with its original concepts. Instead of doubling down on what made these games powerful in the first place, they have expanded sideways until the core experience has been drowned out. The clearest example, and honestly the lowest hanging piece of fruit here, is Assassin's Creed. The first game was limited in scope. One city, one clear design, tactical stealth, brutal combat, and a gripping story. That's it. It didn't need anything else, and it worked. It worked so well that it turned Ubisoft into a household name. But as the series went on, that formula started to slip away. Rather than refining the mechanics that carried it, the games ballooned. Yes, there were some high points. I think that Black Flag ship mechanics are really great, but outside of that, every edition pulled away further and further from what the series was supposed to be. I mean, Assassin's Creed today isn't even the same series. It's an open world RPG packed with mounts, gathering, crafting, base building, loot mechanics, and layered RPG progression. Ubisoft has gone so wide with the experience that every system now has to justify its own existence, which means that they're forced into the core loop, whether you like it or not. You want to advance the story? Too bad. Killing enemies and completing missions is not enough anymore. You've got to climb lookout points. You got to run obstacle courses. You got to scavenge for hidden collectibles just to be able to unlock skill points, because otherwise, you'll hit a progression gate that's going to block you from continuing the main narrative. And the worst part is, if the game still nailed its fundamentals, maybe all that padding wouldn't be so bad, but it doesn't. The narrative is a shadow of what it once used to be. Voice acting feels completely phoned in. Stealth is irrelevant now if you just spec your character into a walking tank, and combat is simpler and duller than most mobile games. All of these are symptoms of resources being siphoned away from the core experience and poured into systems, side systems that demand that you use them. On paper, this game has a lot to do, but when you're forced to do all of it just to continue the narrative, that's not enriching the experience, it's dragging it down. It's not engaging the player, it's exhausting them. And it isn't just Assassin's Creed, it's become the template for AAA as a whole. Look at Starfield. Bethesda crammed everything into that game. Gathering, crafting, cooking, base building, outposts, shipbuilding. They even stretched the scale of space itself, trying to make it feel real. Ambitious, for sure, but by spreading themselves across so many systems, the quality of the game collapsed. The game became a mess of loading screens, character building that once defined Bethesda felt completely flat, gunplay was stiff, AI was brain dead, and the story was the most generic thing that I'd ever played in my life, and all of the planets were lifeless. Shipbuilding was a cool idea, but what is the point of building a ship when flying a ship feels meaningless? There are endless examples of this, but I think it boils down to two things: games going too wide in scope and games that are just going too wide in the audience that they're chasing. Publishers want to inflate playtime to justify their budget and their price tag while also convincing themselves that more features will pull in bigger crowds. Take Doom the Dark Ages as an example. I am only bringing this up because there's one guy in my comment section that will not shut up and stop defending the game because he doesn't like my opinion on it, but it is the perfect example. They padded the game out to have a longer narrative, not because fans wanted it, but because they thought it might broaden its appeal. That's also why they threw in shallow gimmicks like a 2-click giant robot fight or a dragon flying minigame. Hell, it's the reason why they swapped out Too Young to Die for the sanitized version of Aspiring Slayer difficulty. None of it is about serving the core audience. It is about the hypothetical audience that they've created in their heads and how they're going to get them. And all of this just makes these games feel like bland, tasteless slop. The bigger they get, the less substance is there. These stories are starting to feel like filler, the gameplay is getting stale, and the fundamentals are being ignored. Think about where we're at right now. A game shipping with stable frame rates is treated like a selling point. That's how far things have gotten. Studios are spreading themselves so thin that optimization isn't even on the table anymore. This is what's tanking their credibility with players. And people don't understand just how deep this damage goes, because it's not just their games getting worse, it's not just their reputations collapsing. Going wide also balloons their costs. Their teams swell, their budgets explode, and suddenly you have a game that would have cost you $150 million that's now costing you 2 to 3 times that. Then, inevitably, when that game underperforms, the losses hit them even harder, and instead of scaling back, they just double down. They convince themselves that the answer is going even wider, reaching even more people, and then the cycle repeats, dragging them further and further into the hole. Now, I don't want this all to sound like pure doom and gloom. I do like video games, by the way. Some AAA games do get it right. Take Final Fantasy VII Remake, the sequel to Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. They added a lot. Huge open-world areas to explore, piles of side content. The Golden Saucer was packed with mini-games and side stories, but the difference is the core gameplay actually improved. The narrative was stronger, the RPG mechanics were deeper, and the combat felt way sharper. Aerial combos actually clicked better, team attacks were really cool, and they added some visual flair. Boss fights had a lot more variety, and the overall gameplay just felt better. It proved that you can expand the game without losing sight of why people like it. That said, I still think that there's a ceiling, because even when it works, these games are getting enormous. The average playtime is now creeping past 40 hours on a game, and people do not have that kind of time. With work, family, and everything else, finishing a single game can stretch into weeks or even months in some cases, by which point 3 more massive releases are already out. Even when the quality is there, the sheer size becomes a barrier to entry. And that's where we're at right now. AAA keeps chasing breadth instead of depth, more systems, more hours, more everything, yet the core experience keeps getting diluted along the way. Even in the rare cases where expansion works, like Rebirth, the sheer size becomes its own problem. Bigger doesn't always mean better, and in fact, more times than not, it just means emptier. I don't know about you guys, but when I see a month that's just stacked with AAA games, I almost hope that some of them are bad so I don't have to play them. Because I already know two things right off the get. I don't want to spend that much money, and I don't have that kind of time. And on top of that, I just don't really feel like playing a game that makes me feel like I need to take a nap. You know, on the topic of games that do it right, Elden Ring. Fantastic game. All-time favorite. I will never play it again. I really do not see myself ever playing Elden Ring ever again. They nailed the Dark Souls theme on a massive scale. The narrative was fantastic. The combat was great. The boss fights were absolutely epic. But, goddamn, man, that's a lot of video game. Especially once you add the DLC on top of it. There's no way I could beat that game again. No, I don't have the time. I don't have the hours for that. Maybe it's age. Maybe it's burnout. I'm just getting too old. I guess that's what it is. But it feels like in a lot of cases with a lot of these games that I loved, the reasons I played them just aren't there anymore. You know, when I played Assassin's Creed Shadows, I swear, Scout's Honor, is that how you do it? I swear, I tried to give that game a shot. I really did. I tried to give it a fair shot. But the minute that it hit me with a level gate of level 15 for me to be able to continue on the story, I just gave up. The game was just not good enough for me to be able to justify another 20 hours of busy work. I'm not going to do it. And that's exactly why there is such a wide contrast between indie and AAA right now, because they are the masters of pacing. They are the masters of simplicity. And they know how to make small games feel big and big games feel manageable. And that's a really difficult thing to do, but these guys make it look easy. I have never been exhausted by playing an indie game, and I feel like I could play 20 of them at a time if I wanted to. And I never felt like my time was wasted. And the reason for that is they just take a couple of things and they do them perfectly. Indie games by design can't afford to go wide. They don't have the teams. They don't have the budgets. And more times than not, these guys don't even have the experience to try to make a game that has a lot of systems or is too big. But that limitation is working in their favor. Take Witchfire. That's actually the game that inspired this video. I've been hooked on it. It's an FPS roguelike with leveling persistence like Dark Souls and the enemy mechanics to match, but it never strays beyond that. No cutscenes, no dialogue, no exposition, no side modes. You're just dropped onto an island, you kill monsters, you hunt for secrets, and you fight bosses. That's it. That's the entire game. And because it's being made by a team of less than 20 people, there isn't enough time or money for them to try to chase anything else. That forced focus that they have makes every single part of this game shine brighter than most FPS games on the market right now. The gunplay is some of the best that I've felt since the original Halo series. If I had to put it into words, it feels like what Destiny would be like if that was actually a game that was worth playing, but the movement is fluid, every single weapon feels distinct, and each one of them comes with their own unique quirks where it completely changes the way that you play the game or how you build your character. There's an assault rifle that'll link all the enemies together so your damage will ricochet shots between them. There's a shotgun that'll stack power with every single consecutive hit. There's a rifle with a charge shot that rewards your timing, and the more that you use these weapons, the more their abilities evolve, and sometimes they'll gain entirely new mechanics altogether. But because weapons are the main focus in Witchfire, everything else is built to serve them. Killing enemies is just going to unlock more weapon abilities. Experience points are going to let you level your character to fit your favorite loadout. Boss fights are tuned to try to push you to diversify your arsenal. Each run is going to give you currency to be able to buy new weapons and upgrades. Even the roguelike modifiers are all about enhancing the way that your guns play. Everything is extending from that core, and it's all tied back to just one mechanic. And because of that, the quality feels higher and tighter across the board. No wasted time, no wasted effort. Every action feeds back into the gunplay, and that constant feedback, that constant sense of progression keeps you hooked. And once I noticed this, I started looking back at all the other indie games that I've been playing, and it's the same design philosophy that just keeps showing up again and again. Take Shroom and Gloom. You guys obviously really like that one. On the surface, it's just a standard deck builder, but its focus is on its aesthetics. It's trippy, it's hypnotic, and it's instantly memorable. The gameplay loop itself is simple, but the atmosphere is what makes it impossible to stop playing. Then on the flip side, you got a game like Balatro. Aesthetics are minimal in that game, almost bare bones, but the focus is entirely on the deck building itself, every card, every combo, and every move. Two games, the same genre, completely different strengths, both thriving because they know exactly what they're about and what they're not trying to be. Hollow Knight, one of the most celebrated indie games of all time, has incredibly simple Metroidvania combat, but it is refined to a razor's edge, responsive, precise, and satisfying. The team has poured all the rest of their energy into the hand-drawn art aesthetic and the music of the game, creating an atmosphere that is so immersive that the simplicity of its mechanics actually become a strength because it's not distracting you from living in that world. Then there's Schedule 1, which took over the internet earlier this year. It didn't lean on narrative, fidelity, or world building. All it did was just focus on production, automation, scalability, and crafting, systems that let the player generate an endless variety of effects out of a very narrow concept. I could list examples all day, but the pattern here is clear. The most successful indie games, the ones that are now rivaling some of the biggest names in the industry, do not spread themselves thin. They pick one or two things, they refine those endlessly, and that's why they shine. Players come to them for the core experience. That experience delivers, and the end result is both our time and our money feeling respected. This all kind of reminds me of that scene from Hunter x Hunter where Netero is training in the mountains, and to honor the martial arts, he prays and throws 10,000 punches a day for 4 years straight. At the beginning, it takes him 18 hours, but by the end, he can do it in under one. That's what these indie developers are doing right now. They're not dabbling in dozens of systems. They're honing a single sword, and that's the only sword that they have, and they're honing it until they've mastered it completely. I think that there's a direct tie between how focused indie games are around their core mechanics and how rewarding they feel to play. When everything revolves around one central loop, every single action is contributing to progress, and you actually feel like you're moving forward. That constant reinforcement is so satisfying in a way that we just don't see that in AAA games anymore. I mean, think about a game like Diablo 4. That game is massive, but it feels shallow as all hell. The difficulty scales with your level, so you never actually feel stronger. You're not conquering anything in that game. You're just jogging on a treadmill. No matter how much time you sink in, the game is going to rob you of that sense of progression. And without progression, what is the point? That's why so many people have bounced off that game. That's why it's been circling the drain ever since it launched. Players were not being rewarded for their time. They just felt like they were being managed by a system. And this is not a problem that's unique to Diablo. It's everywhere in AAA games. These games are so bloated with mechanics and so obsessed with long-term engagement that they flattened out the very things that made their games enjoyable. Growth, reward, progression, everything. It's all gone. Instead of just letting you feel like you're actually building mastery or that you're getting better at a game, they just dilute it with endless side content, artificial gates, and time sinks. You end up feeling like you're just going through the motions without ever feeling like you actually accomplished anything. Hell, to be honest with you, in a lot of cases, it feels like you're just walking away from a game, not even feeling like you played one. Indie games just don't have that problem because they can't afford to have that problem. With limited resources, they have to make sure that every single action counts. Progression is not stretched across 10 systems. It's embedded directly into the heart of the game. When you get better at Celeste, you feel it in your fingertips. When your deck clicks and Slay the Spire, it's not just ticking off nodes on a skill tree. You are watching an entire system bend around all of the choices that you made. These games are built to reward you constantly, not with filler or cosmetics, but with an actual feeling, a genuine feeling of accomplishment. That's why players are gravitating towards these games. They respect your time. They don't waste it with pointless padding or grinding. Instead, they just try to make sure that every single minute feels meaningful. And that's something that AAA is almost completely lost sight of. It feels like a lot of AAA games today are more focused on just activating neurons than actually being an enjoyable game or, God forbid, a refreshing experience. Everything over the course of the last 10 years has grown to the point where so many of these games feel like they just need to have stuff to do. That's all it is, rather than actually having anything meaningful to do. More and more, year over year, even with some of the best games in AAA, I'm not finishing these games saying, wow, that was incredible, or feeling sad that it's over. More or less, I'm just happy that I made it to the finish line and didn't waste $70. And I think that's the real difference. AAA keeps going wide and stretching itself thin, while indie games go deep, and in doing so, they become the most rewarding part about gaming today. You know, I only came across this idea because of the fact that I was flipping through my library looking for games that I wanted to play. I landed on a couple of indie games that I wanted to cycle through. And then somebody let me know, hey, by the way, you know, we have Metal Gear coming out and Battlefield and Borderlands and Lost Soulside and a couple of other games. And I was just like, I don't want to. I don't know if I want to. We have so many games that are coming out in the next coming weeks and coming months. And while I love content, I don't know if I can play them all. Sorry, man. You know, it just feels like AAA games require too much energy to play anymore, and it shouldn't feel that way. It's such a weird thing for me to say, but that's honestly the way that I feel. I had a bunch of people that were asking me to play Mafia Old Country, and I was just like, I don't want to. As simple as that, I don't want to. You know, I've played a lot of really great AAA games, but they just make me feel worn out. And in a lot of cases, when I play an indie game, I feel refreshed. I feel entertained. I feel like I got something out of the experience, like I learned something or I experienced something new, or I don't know. I just feel rewarded for playing their games, and I just don't get that with a lot of AAA games anymore. I don't really know how to put it better into words than what I did with this video, but hopefully it actually worked. I do think that walking away from the core aspects of your game is the core issue here, because when you're flattening out progression the way that a lot of these games have to be able to stretch out their gameplay as long as they could, you need those spikes in there. I need those ups and downs. I need to feel like a god, and then I need to get knocked down a couple of pegs and then climb my way back up. That's what makes these games feel so good, because you feel like you're actually overcoming an obstacle rather than the game itself being the obstacle. And I know it sounds like a meme, but they don't make them like they used to, and honestly, they just don't anymore. And I think that's why indie has been doing so well recently. It's because these guys are so much closer to the origins of where game design starts, so they're so much closer to the core mechanics, and that's why people are starting to gravitate towards them. You know, this is just one reason out of 100, but I think it's the most important reason of all. I really do. And it goes back to this idea that I had before where I was talking about how more of these publishers need to just let their guys make all kinds of different games. Make smaller games. Make games that don't cost you $300 million. Make games that don't have everybody's lives and their jobs riding on the line of its success. Make some games that are fun because the developers are having fun making them. Those are the kind of games that I want to play. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you guys did enjoy the video, like the video, subscribe to the channel, share the video with your friends. Thank you for everything. Thank you for all the support. Thank you for all the kind comments recently. I've really appreciated it. Anyway, I will catch you guys later. Stay cool, stay righteous, stay safe. Peace.